could see interest rates fall, increasing government borrowing costs, driving austerity. That was really worrying.
Hello and welcome back to the channel. Fang has joined us today. He is being a pest, and he will probably be a pest throughout this video. Oh, there he goes. Okay. So today I want to talk to you about a book that I really enjoyed and would love to recommend to you. I'd say it's probably one of the best books that I've read so far this year, at least that was released this year. And that book, revealed behind the cat, is Under the Eye of the Big Bird by Hiromi Kawakami. Yeah, there you go. That's it around the cat. Under the Eye of the Big Bird was originally released in Japan in 2016. Fluff everywhere. This is part of Hiromi Kawakami's back catalogue as she's become more established overseas as an author, and her work is getting wider audiences. For instance, there's Strange Weather in Tokyo, there's Mr. Nakano's Thrift Shop, there's The Third Love, which is... That was caught on film. Your crimes are being observed by the world right now. And her work is kind of mostly this literary fiction style. There's a lot of lightness in her books. There's a, kind of light and dark, but there's always something, there's like a core of just beauty. And the beauty is often shown in her writing style, which is a very simplistic writing style. Of course, this being translated fiction, I must caveat that by saying that Asa Yoneda, who translated this book, will have had to do some of the work to make the writing feel as it does in Japanese to English readers. It's important to remember that the words that are used in this book are kind of the work of two people in a way. This is quite interesting though, like Japanese as a language is actually like less verbose than English is, for instance. A lot of the meaning conveyed in Japanese is done through context. So you'll have kind of sentence structures that use fewer words, but there is a character of Japanese that you find in Hiromi Kawakami's work, and especially in this one. So I'd say that the writing style is very simplistic, gives it a lot of room to breathe, and that is actually quite refreshing considering some of the books I've read this year have been impressive, let's say, in word choice. I think that what makes Hiromi Kawakami's prose impressive is how understated it is. So what is Under the Eye of the Big Bird? This is a work of literary sci-fi, and it is told in a slightly unconventional structure. This isn't necessarily a novel that you start the plot at the beginning and the plot ends at the end. This is kind of more like a series of like vignettes, not quite short stories, but like, just kind of glimpses of a future where humanity is weirdly going extinct. The fertility rates are declining. Together, society is having to adapt in order to ensure the continuity of the human race. So you have these little kind of short stories that kind of show you a window into that and into some of the different ways that society has adapted. And there's a nice kind of couplet kind of structure. So often a story will then be immediately followed by another story that kind of isn't necessarily a continuation of it, but harkens back to some of the elements in the previous story. And they kind of go in pairs throughout the book, which I thought was quite interesting. One advantage that also gives Hiromi Kawakami is that each of those little vignettes has its own kind of distinct DNA or its own thing that it's trying to explore. So, for instance, there is one story where a woman meets her clone, herself, essentially. And basically it does some really weird, flippy things with first-person pronouns, saying, I said this and then I said that. And that, for me, was a really clever, interesting exploration. I think I'm always interested in art to see people have creative new approaches to just to try out and see what comes out of it. Some experiments might not be as successful as others, but for me, that one was really interesting and quite successful. There's another really good short story in here, which is like told in like a first person conversational way. So it is from this character who is quite eccentric character who has developed as part of this kind of tribe of humans, this genetic variation that allows him to energize himself through sunlight by having basically chlorophyll under his skin. So what that does is creates just like a different mode of living for him and some completely different societal expectations. And this interview is happening and he's kind of talking back and forth with the interviewer, although you only hear his voice, his POV, you don't hear the interviewer's responses. And you kind of get a real sense of how different life looks to someone who doesn't need to eat to survive. He doesn't need to have sex to survive. He just, you know, reproduces in other ways. It's a very interesting approach, a very interesting story. And so this book is full of these little kind of stories, but they do, as I say, all link together in a certain way. By the end of the book, you kind of have a much better understanding of why the world is how it is, the different efforts that people are making to keep the world alive with humanity, and how humanity has changed over time. And then you get a very strange narrative thing happen at the end, which I'm not going to spoil for you. You are left going, huh, and then you almost want to start reading again from the beginning, which I think is a sign of a very good book, that you want to read it twice. So yeah, I think that this book was wonderful. See, you're not very interested in this book because you're a mouser, not a birder. I need you to chill. Can you chill? I'm gonna get you a blanket. Or the cushion. Here you go. Have a cushion. Please sit on that cushion. Yeah? He's paralyzed on the cushion. Let's hope he stays there. One of the ways Hiromi Kawakami brings her earlier style into this book is to have a few kind of these magical realism elements that come through. And I found that really interesting in the context of a sci-fi, to have these strange emergent phenomena that defy explanation, but then provide some really fertile ground for exploring deeper questions. You know, the ability to read someone's emotional state just by looking at them, just by kind of sensing them, and what that would do to your relationships. And so that's just one example. There are plenty of others as well. And the big bird comes into that as well. Considering it was written in 2016, there's also a really prescient view of artificial intelligence included in this as well. Well, prescient in the sense that it doesn't necessarily observe, you know, like ChatGPT and all of the current kind of AI revolution, but it kind of gives a view as to what AI could become and how AI could co-inhabit the world of humans. I don't want to go too far into that one as well, because that story was a really nice surprise. So again, I'm kind of treating this with a light touch. I think you need to go and read it yourself. I mean, if that wasn't obvious, I think you definitely should read this yourself. So there we go. For me, this was a wonderful book, and I would love to give it... so there are 14 chapters in all, so I'm going to give this book 13 out of 14 chapters. I thought it was beautiful and lovely, and I highly recommend it. Thank you very much, Laura, for introducing me to Hiromi Kawakami. That was a great choice. Thanks very much for watching. It's nice to go back to an old kind of book recommendation video. I haven't done those in a little while. If you enjoyed that, please let me know, and please validate me in my choices to it. So if you'd like to see more of these, do please let me know. I would love to hear it. Thank you once again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.